spirit of the elf. Unconsciously, from the first life, the two people had a relationship, but after 3 lives, they became enemies. It was also fate. In the morning, on the high mountain, the fog was thick and dense. A young man about 6 meters tall, with a handsome face, holding a wooden stick, appeared and walked through the forest. On his back, the young man carried a very large water basket, and water was continuously flowing out of the basket. The young man named Thieu, was from Ton Sun Town and was about 17 years old this year. Thieu was strong and extremely handsome, so many girls in the area had intentions towards him. However, Thieu had always been worried about his sick old mother. What about his father? His father had died in battle at the border. He was determined not to get married and refused many marriage proposals, hoping to one day avenge his father's death. When Thieu was 10 years old, the entire Ton Sun town was swept away by a flood, and countless people died. Many died from the flood, and even more died from the epidemic. After that battle, the town was sparsely populated. His mother and he came here from another region to settle down. 5 years later, they heard the news of their father's death. It was said that the Cham army had attacked the 2 prefectures of O and Lai, and countless soldiers and officers had lost their lives. Because of this, the king had to flee the capital. Hearing the bad news of his father's death, Thieu was angry and wanted to join the army to kill the enemy and take revenge. However, his mother constantly opposed him and bought him a good piece of land in the west of the town to force him to cultivate it. From then on, he had to accept his fate. However, Thieu had the intention of not getting married until he established a career to serve the country and avenge his father. The following year, Thieu thought of a new direction. He sold the piece of land his mother had bought for him, moved his house into the mountains, and wanted to study Zhuge Liang in China, studying history books to plan for his career. Since then, Thieu has been living in this mountain for about a year. Occasionally, he would go down the mountain to visit his sick and old mother and send money for her to take care of. As for himself, he would hide in the mountains like a Taoist priest. Until one day, the water in the house ran out. Thieu took a basket of water and went up the mountain to get water. When he was halfway up the mountain with the water, he suddenly saw a very beautiful flower tree. The white leaves were still buds, but the fragrance could not be hidden. Thieu liked it very much, brought the whole pot of flowers home to plant. Every day he took care of the flower tree and considered it a treasure. Soul of love. The following year, the Kampa army attacked the capital, and the king and generals all fled. Che Bong Na led his army to sweep through the entire Ton Sun town, even charging up the mountain. The Kampa army heard that there was a hermit living on Ton Sun mountain, so they were very envious and wanted to capture him for Che Bong Na. They searched Ton Sun mountain very urgently, and if any hermit resisted, they would kill him right there. They searched for Thieu's hiding place and took him to the middle of the garden, forcing him to get on a horse. Thieu refused, so they slashed him with one blow, causing his head to fall off. Blood splattered everywhere, and the blood fell onto the white flower tree, unintentionally nourishing the tree spirit. After cultivating for 100 years, the flower tree will become a spirit. After another 100 years, it will transform into a human. Because the flower spirit was previously stained with Thieu's blood, it will need human blood to cultivate faster. It decides to go down the mountain to find someone to kill and get blood to cultivate. Who would have thought that the first person it encountered was none other than Thieu, its benefactor from its previous life, who had now reincarnated as a new human. Knowing this, the goblin could not bear to do anything, and only silently followed. Feng Thieu's next life was Chu Xin, a famous pig butcher in the Ton Sun region. Although he was said to be a pig butcher, Chu Xin was also very handsome. But somehow, in this life, Chu Xin was over 30 years old but still had no wife or children. When people in town asked about this, Chu Xin only replied, "I often dreamed of a god with a shining halo flying in the clouds, telling me that I was punished by not being able to marry because I had been entangled in a bad fate." Everyone in town just laughed when they heard those words and thought that Chu Xin was joking. However, Chu Xin knew that what he said was completely true. Because every time he intended to get married, something bad would happen. Near Ton Sun town that year, There was a girl named Dao from Duong village who really liked Chu Sin's personality. The two of them were also on the same page, so they planned to get married. However, less than a few months before the wedding day, she suddenly fell to the ground and died unexpectedly, foaming at the mouth. Her family was about to carry her to the mandarin to ask for a funeral when a thunderous shout rang out from the sky, "You dare to think about someone else's husband? I punish you to die for 3 days without burial." After those words were said, the family was very scared and did not dare to bury her body on their own. Someone deliberately tried to do the opposite, but before they could get close to the body, they were thrown down and rolled, hitting their head on the steps of the house until they were unconscious, so they did not dare to do anything against it. That news reached Chu Sin's ears, so the first engagement failed. That year he was 18 years old. When Zhu Xing was 22 years old, there was a girl named Wei in the north of Qingshan town who fell in love. Her father was also a rich and famous landowner in the area. Hearing that she was crazy about Zhu Xing who had butchered a pig, the landowner immediately sent someone to force Zhu Xing to come to his house, and also ordered him to prepare the wedding gifts. But the landowner had not been able to complete these things for a few days before he died, foaming at the mouth and dying miserably. Wei had no relatives, and all of her property was squandered by the servants, leaving only a garden. Zhu Xing took advantage of this and left without anyone to take care of her. In the end, Wei was so desperate that she had to borrow money, and even sold herself into a brothel to pay off her debts. After that incident, Chu Sin thought that he himself could not get married. There were also stories about people losing their fortune and their bodies being exiled because of him, so he was even more determined not to get married in this life. Chu Sin lived alone until he was over 30. One day, while going out of town for a walk, he accidentally got lost and went up Tan Sun Mountain. He saw a very beautiful young woman. She was wearing a white dress and had black bangs. Judging from her identity, she must be a young lady from a noble family. Chu Sin was so fascinated by her that he lost his appetite and sleep. Every day, he would wait until the pork was sold out quickly so he could sneak out behind the mountain to admire the beauty. The beauty wore white clothes, although the style was different every day, the color was the same. She often walked alone on the mountain path. Chu Sin did not know why she often appeared in this area, but he followed her many times and always lost sight of her. There was a day when Chu Sin insisted on following him, so closely that he was only about 10 meters away. But by the time he reached the halfway point of the mountain, he had already disappeared. Many times like that made Chu Sin very curious, so he tried to find out more. One day, he followed the girl to the middle of the mountain and saw that she had disappeared like before. This time Chu Sin did not stop, he chased after her, grabbed her wrist and pulled her back, wanting to ask her what happened. But in the blink of an eye, she had disappeared again. In Chu Sin's palm, there was still some white powdery residue. From that day on, he guessed that the young girl might be a flower demon, a flower that had transformed into a human-like demon. But Chu Sin was not afraid, but rather fascinated. In ancient stories, he often heard people say that there were people who died horribly because they fell in love with a demon, and there were also people who fell in love with a demon and later were given magic to become immortals. Those stories were like fleeting dreams. Mid-January is the time of youth, people all over the country go on spring outings. Waiting for this occasion, he waited at the foot of the mountain. He guessed that the young elf girl, who also craved human pleasures, would come down the mountain at this time to enjoy the spring. Sure enough, the young girl appeared, dressed in white, her whole body smelled of a sweet fragrance, her face was beautiful. She blended in with the crowd of people going out for a walk. Chu Sin followed and waited for an opportunity. Around noon, unexpectedly, an old doctor named Teep passed by and saw the young girl and became horny. He was a powerful man in town, and had a group of thugs following him. After a while of probing, he found out that she was alone, so he deliberately incited the thugs to kidnap her and act rudely. When Chu Sin found out about this, he was furious. Taking advantage of the old man's carelessness, he took out a butcher's knife and stabbed him. Blood spurted out in a jet, more than when a pig was being slaughtered. Old Teet rolled his eyes and died on the spot. Chu Sin hid in the crowd. Tourists panicked and shouted to catch the culprit, but they didn't know who it was because there were too many people around. The group of thugs later left because Old Man Teet had died. Chusin followed the young girl. When they reached a deserted alley, the young girl turned into a small alley. Chusin continued to follow. After walking about half a step, a gentle voice sounded very pleasant to the ear and asked, "Why do you keep following me?" Chusin turned to look at the source of the sound and saw the young girl smiling at him. He was very happy, immediately ran to hold her hand and whispered, "I have always admired you, but unfortunately I don't know your name, so I don't dare to get to know you. Now that you have discovered me, I dare not hide it anymore. Now that I have said that I only want to be with you, I vow to love only you for the rest of my life." The girl heard and immediately withdrew her hand, smiling and saying, "No one makes such vows upon meeting. If you really have the heart, then come to Ton Sun Mountain on the 15th of next month to see me." The girl finished speaking and turned around to leave. Chusin asked, "I still don't know what her name is?" The girl replied, "My family name is Liu, my name is Hu Tae, please remember this." Then he disappeared at the end of the alley. Chusin chased after him until he saw a dead end, further confirming that Hu Tae was the transformed flower spirit. He opened his palm and looked closely, and discovered that it was very similar to the last time. His hand was covered in pollen, and smelled very fragrant. Chusin returned home, planning to wait until the 15th of the following month to make a trip to Ton Sun Mountain. Unfortunately, before that time came, the Ming army invaded the country, and the Ho dynasty fell. The entire Ton Sun town was swept away by the enemy, killing countless people, including Chusin. That year, Chusin was nearly 40 years old. Chusin's next life was Dongwen. He was born into a noble family. His father was a mandarin and orator under Lord Trin Sam. Dongwen from childhood to adulthood was known as a bookworm and was rarely seen socializing outside. It was a humid day, and Dongwen was feeling frustrated, so he went to Ton Sun Mountain for a trip. Unexpectedly, when he reached the middle of the mountain, he saw a very large flower tree, taller than a person. In his entire life, he had never thought that he would see such a large flower tree, so he was very excited. From then on, he went home to find a good worker, planning to dig up the tree, including its roots, and bring it home to plant. One day, Dongwen was sleeping and saw in his dream a young woman in white. She appeared sitting at the door, sobbing and saying, "I have no grudge against you, why do you have the heart to harm me?" Dongwen asked repeatedly before she said, "I am that flower tree, if you don't want to kill me, don't dig up that flower tree, I will repay you." Dongwen agreed immediately. The next morning when he woke up, he told the worker that he didn't have to do it anymore. Then he went up Ton Sun Mountain, stood in front of the flower tree and whispered, "If what happened last night is true, then please show your face so I can see you." Sure enough, a moment later, a young girl appeared from behind Dongwen. She had fair skin, smooth face, and a bright expression. Dongwen was delighted and immediately ran over to hold his hand, intending to get closer, but the young girl immediately pushed him away and said, "Although I am not human, I am still a woman and must follow the rules of etiquette and cannot disobey them." Dongwen understood and immediately swore and said, "Then I will marry her properly, please my father bring the dowry to meet her." After saying that, he immediately turned around and left. The next day, he urged his father to prepare the dowry to ask for his wife's hand. His father asked what kind of person his in-law was, but he refused to answer. The next day, before the dowry was ready, there was a thief in the Lord's palace. The Lord was angry and immediately had Dongwen's entire family beheaded, and his entire clan was exterminated. That year Dongwen was 19 years old. After 3 lifetimes, the Feng Fu of the past died an unnatural death, which made the flower spirit feel very strange. After she finally investigated, she found out what a cruel fate was. That Feng Fu had not been able to marry a woman who had an engagement with a deity for 3 lifetimes. He also committed a serious crime of falling in love with a demon like her, which is why he died an unnatural death. If he married a mortal, the deities would punish the mortal to die in his place. But if he married a demon, the deities could not control him, so they could only kill him to preserve their relationship. The goblin knew about this and was very angry with the god. She secretly waited until the next life to break this evil fate. She did not wait for him to come find her, but would go find him herself to force fate to break the god's mind. Down Wen's next life was a Taoist priest named Kung. In this life, Taoist priest Trin Kung extremely hated the goblin race, perhaps fulfilling the god's wish soon. Trin Kung is famous for his excellent exorcism skills. He also studied exorcism from the Lu Ban and Mao Shan sects, and has many skilled fellow practitioners. When Trin Kung became enlightened, he counted his fingers and realized that he had 3 lifetimes of karmic ties with demons. He then automatically wanted to cut off this relationship, built an altar to worship the gods in heaven, and invited them to perform a ceremony of face-to-face worship. When the ceremony was over, the sky shook and everything was bright. The demon knew that Trin Kung had married a god and became angry. From then on, his admiration turned to hatred and he used many evil tricks to try to kill Trin Kung. She transformed herself into an old nun, begging for food at the end of the street. During the day she went out to beg for food, and at night she went to sleep in an abandoned temple. That abandoned temple was right in front of the Taoist temple. Trin Kung had no doubts about this nun, until later he discovered that there was a lot of evil energy around the temple. After using magic to question her for a long time, the local god finally revealed. Right near your temple, there is a flower demon that has transformed into a spirit that is several hundred years old. It has been waiting here for several months, just to kill you. Hearing this, Trin Kung was very angry, so he took a wooden sword in one hand and rushed straight to the abandoned temple, wanting to find the nun to kill her. The flower demon did not know what was going on, and still came out to greet Trin Kung, but was slashed by him, causing his arm to fall off. The demon was frightened and fled, transforming into the wind and flying away. From then on, the hatred towards Trin Kung grew heavier and heavier. On the slopes of Ton Sun Mountain, people could see that the giant flower of that day had lost a petal, making it look much less beautiful. Another time, Trin Kung had to go to Kwok Oai town to meet a fellow practitioner. Passing by the roadside, he saw a very ragged beggar woman. He felt pity and bent down to give her a coin. Unexpectedly, she was a demon in disguise. Taking advantage of his carelessness, he stabbed Trin Kung in the eye with a knife. Trin Kung's right eye was hit by the knife and fell out of its gaping eye socket. Trin Kung quickly retreated, intending to slash the demon, but the demon had already run away. From then on, Trin Kung was blind in one eye, and the hatred between the two became even deeper. Unconsciously, from the first life, the two people had a relationship, but after 3 lives, they became enemies. It was also fate. In the blink of an eye, the man with long hair and white beard finished telling the story. Lang was still lost in thought for a long time, then asked. So, did your master Trin Kung later kill that demon spirit? The white-bearded man replied. There's no way to kill it, that demon is getting more and more cunning. In the end, my master had to move to the mountains to avoid meeting it. Lang looked up at the altar behind the white-bearded man. He saw a drawing of an old Taoist priest with a very long beard, holding a whisk with white hairs hanging down to his knees. He asked. So the painting that you hung up is the painting of Mr. Trin Kung, right? It's also missing an eye. The white-bearded man replied. Yes, it is you. The founder did not marry or have children, and did not accept disciples. How strange. Lang slapped his thigh and said. Well, I really admire those Taoist priests in ancient stories. They might even be more impressive than the swordsman in Kim Dung's novels. The white-bearded man heard this and his beard seemed to twist, his eyes widened and he said. You are rude, you are not allowed to insult monks like that. Anyway, I have finished telling your fortune, please go home. After saying that, the white-bearded man waved his hand to send Lang away, then quickly put the 50,000 dong polymer bill in his pocket once more. Lang looked here and laughed heartily saying, Oh my God, I thought my uncle was so noble, But it turns out that the descendant of that god is still so greedy. The white-bearded man said nothing, just glared at Lang. Lang did not argue with him, just turned his head, smiled and walked away. In early spring, he went to the temple to relax his mind for the upcoming days of work. Lang was originally a pork butcher, probably very similar to Trin Kung in his second life. This time, when he went to visit the temple, he saw a fortune teller sitting in a corner, so he got inspired and asked him to tell his fortune. Unexpectedly, the fortune teller immediately said that he was possessed by a ghost and would not be able to get married. He even told a story about his ancestor to scare Lang. Lang listened and felt funny, wanting to slap this teacher. But thinking back, he found the story that the teacher told very similar to Liao Zhai. It sounded interesting, so he didn't mind giving him the money, considering it as money to listen to his story. Lang returned home and the next day went to a local's house to ask for 2 pigs to prepare to sell. Lang locked the 2 pigs in a cage behind the house. Lang's house was also a street-front house, located right on a busy intersection. Lang's parents died when Lang was only 22 years old. That year, while they were traveling, the entire car carrying them crashed into a ravine, killing everyone. After that, every time before Tet, Lang still made an effort to go to the accident site to burn incense. The road is located at the intersection of Luongshan, making the town very busy. Many bus drivers often stop by to rest. After arranging the 2 pigs in the cage, Lang unlocked the door, pulled out the usual wooden table, and cleaned it thoroughly. When Lang opened the door for a while, he suddenly discovered that a pot of lilies had been placed in front of the door. He didn't know who had placed it there. Lang frowned and considered, then took the flower pot into the house and placed it somewhere. Lilies were beautiful flowers, with a strong fragrance and long-lasting blooms. Placing lilies in the house could even fill the entire room with fragrance. Lang was very happy to know that someone had intentionally given him this flower pot, so he temporarily did not think about slaughtering the pig. He only thought about where to put this flower pot. The pot of lilies was about 20 centimeters tall, and the branches and leaves were twice as tall. It was not suitable to put it on the altar because the altar was too small, and it was not very polite to put it on the table, and there was a lot of dirt in it. In the end, Lang decided to put the pot of lilies at the head of the bed so he could look at it every day. After placing the flower pot, Lang walked back to the wooden table that he usually used to slaughter pigs. Lang dragged the table out into the yard, sprayed water to clean the table surface, and scrubbed the table with an old rag that he had washed clean. While cleaning the wooden table for butchering pigs, he suddenly heard a shout interrupting him. "Where is Lang? Come out here." Lang widened his eyes in anger, not understanding what was going on, then saw from the other side of the street, Bald Hung leading a group of young men with dyed blue and red hair passing by. Bald Hung is a famous gangster in Luongshan. He manages Luongshan bus station and collects protection fees for pedestrians and buses on the interprovincial route. Baldhead Hung was famous, so everyone here knew him and didn't dare to mess with him. But others wouldn't dare to do that, but Lang did. Seeing Baldhead Hung with his eyes wide open, Lang went inside the house, took out a 3-bladed knife, held it straight up, pointed it at Baldhead Hung and shouted loudly, "Whoever dares to come up here one more step, I will stab them all to death." Bald Hung walked to the sidewalk, stopped and didn't go any further, just shouted, "Damn, this dog is about to die and still biting randomly? If you're smart, put down that blunt knife and I'll go easy on you. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait for it to be crushed to pieces." Hearing Bald Hung's threats, Lang not only wasn't afraid but also laughed out loud. "What? Are you only good at talking? Who was so drunk yesterday that I smashed a bottle on his head and still doesn't remember?" Bald Hung rubbed his head. On his head was still a clear wound that had dried blood from last night's fist fight with Lang. Last night, Lang went to drink beer at High XOM restaurant and met Hung's group who were also drinking. Hung got drunk and went to relieve himself, staggered and stuck his head right next to Lang's beer drinking spot. He opened his mouth and called Lang a dog. Lang was so angry that he grabbed a Hanoi beer bottle and smashed it straight into Hung's head. The beer bottle shattered, Hung's head bled profusely and he passed out. He must have woken up this morning and found out that Lang beat him last night, so he brought his men here to cause trouble. Seeing Lang stubbornly refusing to put down the knife, Bald Hung found a brick, raised it high and glared, saying, "Put down the knife or your head will break." Suddenly, an ambulance siren wailed loudly. Bald Hung was startled, thinking it was a police car, so he quickly threw the brick on the ground and ran away. Lang shook his head and laughed, then continued to butcher the pig. He took a pig out and placed it on the ground, prepared a basin of water, and tied the pig's legs tightly. He also tied its two hind legs to a sturdy wooden post, to make sure the pig wouldn't struggle and cause him to slip and injure himself while butchering. The pig squealed in pain, the sharp blade was inserted into its throat. Blood spurted out from its throat. Lang took the pig out to the fire touched the pig's fur and skin, giving off an indescribable burnt smell, the smell of burnt meat, but also a bit of a fragrant smell. The pig's meat was then cut into many pieces, divided into separate types of meat to be sold at different prices. That day, Lang's pork stall was selling rather poorly, and he didn't know why. As usual, before 10 o'clock in the morning, all of his pork was sold out and he had to clear the stall. But today, even though he had sold out by the afternoon, there was still a lot of pork left. Lang even had to sell until midnight, and sometimes, just as he put the pork in the fridge, another customer came to ask to buy it. At 10 o'clock at night, the last piece of pork had been sold. While cleaning up and preparing to go to bed, Lang saw a short man slowly walking towards him. Squinting his eyes a little more closely, Lang discovered that the man was actually Bald Head Hung. He strangely asked himself, "What the hell, this Bald Hung has his men everywhere he goes, why is he alone at this hour?" Patiently waiting to see what Bald Hung wanted to do, he saw the guy step in front of him. His face was pale and his mouth was moving. It seemed like he wanted to say something but he couldn't hear clearly. He waved for Bald Hung to come closer so he could hear more clearly, but Bald Hung didn't say anything and just turned his head and walked away. After that day, Bald Hung disappeared, and no one heard anything about him again. A notorious gangster just disappeared in a very strange way. As for Lang, there were even more strange stories. Ever since a pot of lilies appeared in his house, all his good luck in buying and selling seemed to disappear. What was even stranger was that whenever someone came to find him to cause trouble, they would disappear just like the Bald Hung. Many times, Lang would throw away the pot of lilies. But even after throwing it out, the next morning it would appear in front of the door again. Lang was very scared and suspected that something bad had happened related to spirituality, but he did not dare tell anyone. The next day, Lang went to the temple and met the man who had told his fortune. This man was still sitting in the same spot, still unsold as usual. He always sat there, twirling his beard, looking very pleased. Lang came to his fortune-telling stall, sat down in front of him, and began to ask in a low voice, "Do you remember me?" The old fortune-teller's eyes lit up and he immediately spoke. "I thought you were dead and never came back. What happened? You believe what I said, right?" Lang scratched his head and said, "Am I really haunted?" The old teacher smacked his lips and emphasized, "Really, what else? My fortune-telling has always been accurate. And my sect is the one that inherited the profession from Mr. Trin Kung." Lang asked again, "I heard you tell many stories about Mr. Trin Kung, but I don't know when he lived. Can you tell me more?" The old teacher stroked his beard and nodded, saying, "This ancestor Trin Kung is related to Lord Trin during the Lu Trung Hung period. I don't remember exactly when he lived, but it was probably around the Nguyen dynasty. When he was young, he studied magic in China and was very skilled. Later, he specialized in killing demons. When he first came back, his skills were not yet solid, so a goblin took advantage of his carelessness and gouged out his eye. But after he lost his eye, no other demon could harm him. Just in terms of practicing soul-calling spells, he was first class, and he was also very knowledgeable and talented in everything." Hearing the fortune-teller's flattery, Lang also showed admiration. However, he came here today not to listen to the old man's story, but mainly to ask the old man to explain the recent appearance of the pot of lilies and the disappearance of people, and at the same time the decline in business in the past few months. Lang thought for a moment and then said, "Recently, a pot of lilies often appears in front of my house. I don't know who left it. At first, I was interested and thought that someone had given it to me and planted it in the house. Unexpectedly, since I brought that pot of flowers in, business has been slow and I often get into trouble. Strangely enough, the people who come to cause trouble with me disappeared just a few days later. I suspected that there was something fishy about this pot of flowers, so I threw it out of the house. But every time, it would appear again the next morning after I threw it out the night before. There was a time when I even stayed up all night and still couldn't catch who left that pot of flowers. Because I clearly looked through the crack in the door all night, but at exactly 5 a.m., I blinked and saw the pot of flowers there again." The old fortune teller narrowed his eyes, slapped his hand on the table and shouted, "It's a ghost, where else could it be? This time the ghost followed me home. It's a spirit monster, not something else. Let me go to your house, I'll clear this up." Having said that, the old man packed his things and prepared to set up his fortune-telling stall. Lang Ung immediately said, "Okay, you go home and help me. If you can help me, I will treat you to pork all day." The old fortune-teller sniffed and licked his lips when he heard the smell of pork. "It's been a long time since I've eaten pork. This temple doesn't sell it." Then from then on, follow Lang to his home in Luong Sun. As Lang led the fortune teller into the house, the fortune teller sniffed and cleared his throat, asking, "What smells so good?" Lang replied, "It's the smell of lilies, there it is." After saying that, Lang pointed to the lily plant placed right on the table in front of his bed. Then Lang ran to the refrigerator, opened it, took out a piece of meat, brought it to the faucet in the backyard, washed it, added a little salt, and put it in the pot to boil. The aroma of boiled pork wafted through the air. The old fortune teller drooled with longing, but said nothing, just waiting for the meal. While waiting for the meal, he walked around the house, examining it carefully, then looked at the pot of lilies, and thought without saying a word. Lang came up from the kitchen and saw the old man looking around, so he asked, "So do you see anything?" The old man shook his head and said calmly, "No, I don't see anything." Lang was a little annoyed and said, "Why are you so bad? Don't fortune tellers often say when they enter a house that the house has dark or negative energy? All those fortune tellers say the same thing and yet they claim to be so good. Does that mean your profession is not as good?" The old fortune teller put his hands on his hips and argued, "So, only a good fortune teller can say that a house has both positive and negative energy? That's just a trick of scammers to make money. I have to see it before I can say anything. What the hell is wrong with your house that I can say anything about? Because if you talk nonsense and violate the karma of my sect, you will lose all the heavenly opportunities. What else can you do in the future?" Lang laughed heartily, thinking it was right, and asked him again, "What about this flower pot? Do you see anything?" He thought for a long time, then suddenly nodded and said, "See. Flowers don't smell like this." Lang asked, "So what kind of flower smells like that?" The old man tilted his head and calmly said, "Are you really stupid or just pretending? Of course, the flowers are grown in good soil, perennial flowers." He was stunned for a moment, then understood what the old man meant and cursed. "Damn you. I'm not kidding, half the freezer has been full of pork for the past month." The old teacher opened his eyes and asked with a curly beard, "So you boiled unsold meat for me?" Lang smiled, scratched his head and said, "Being single is not that bad, but what the hell are you worried about? You can freeze the meat for up to 10 years and still eat it as usual." The old teacher swallowed his saliva and could not say another word. After the two finished their meal, Lang turned around to close the restaurant door, then suddenly saw the bald-headed figure of Hung appear. He continued walking from the end of the street towards this direction. Lang shouted, "Bald Hung!" But before he could get halfway through, a hand covered his mouth. It was the fortune teller's hand. he said. Shoo, if you don't want to die, don't call it back. Why are you so stupid? It's clearly a ghost, and you still want to call it into your house to be caught. Lang does not think it is right to say. There is a fool, he is the bald hung, living in Luong's son. He has been missing for months now and no one has found him. Yesterday, in town, they even sent the police up here to question every house for information about the bald hung. Now that he is back, I have to go out and tell him the news. The old fortune teller jumped up and said. Oh my God, I've never seen anyone as stupid as you. So let me ask you, why did he disappear for so long and only show up now? And why is he wandering around alone at night like this? I'm not going to curse anyone, is that guy stupid? And in this cold February weather, he's wearing a thin t-shirt, and his face is ashen. Lang explained in a low voice. Then you don't know, this bald hung was famous in the past. And he likes to scare people for fun, so he's very arrogant. It's normal for him to walk around shirtless in the middle of winter. The old fortune teller tiredly waved his hand and said. Okay, I can't tell you, you brought it on yourself, I won't stop you. Lang ignored what the old man said, turned his head and looked through the crack of the door to see if Bald Hung was still there. At that moment, a huge figure wearing a black t-shirt was standing in front of the crack of the door. The white eyes without black pupils opened wide and looked straight at Lang's face, making him jump in surprise. Lang was so scared that he jumped back and shouted. Oh my God! The fortune teller's cackle rang out. What's wrong? I'm right, just don't believe me. As Lang stepped back, Bald Hung's entire body passed through the door, as if the door was no obstacle to him. Bald Hung kept walking straight towards Lang, muttering something that no one knew what he was saying. All he knew was that after a while, he turned around and left, just like the last time Lang saw him. The old fortune teller then spoke up. Luckily for you, I'm here so he won't dare do anything, otherwise. Get over it. No, I've seen Bald Hung with the same appearance once before. Last time, he also walked towards me like that, said a few words to me and then left. Hearing that, the old fortune teller's face immediately turned thoughtful. He said. If so, then he doesn't want to harm you, but I think he seems to want to warn you about something. Lang nodded and said. Yes, I think so too. The old fortune teller nodded. Okay, I will investigate this matter later. For now, we should still consider your pot of lilies. Lang asked. What are you going to do? The fortune teller replied. I want you to throw that flower pot out of the house, and tonight we will watch to see if it was a demon or a goblin that brought it. Lang nodded and immediately did as he was told, throwing the flower pot out onto the side of the road. That night Lang and the fortune teller made a pot of strong tea, their faces as calm as a flute as they looked through the crack in the door to the front of the house. The fortune teller saw him wrap a few red threads around the crack in the door, then took out the bronze mirror to look at himself. Lang saw this and asked. What are you doing? He replied. If it is a normal ghost, some can be seen with the naked eye in the dark, but there are also some that cannot, you have to look through a bronze mirror to see them. If you look through a bronze mirror, that ghost must be very cunning, or must be classified as a goblin to be able to do so. Lang nodded in agreement, and by midnight there was still no sign of the potted lily. But by dawn, things had changed dramatically. While he was in a daze, the fortune teller suddenly shook his hand and said. Quick, it appeared. Lang rubbed his eyes and looked through the crack of the door but saw nothing. He was about to turn around and blame the blind fortune teller when he was knocked on the head by the old man. Oh my God, how stupid you are, look at this bronze mirror. Then the old man pushed Lang's head to look straight into the bronze mirror. Sure enough, the bronze mirror reflected the image of a girl wearing a white dress, her face full of blue veins, her lips bright yellow, her eyes red as fire. She broke off one of her fingers, grabbed a handful of soil, and stuck her finger in it. In the blink of an eye, her finger grew into a lily, just like the flower pot Lang had thrown away earlier, and the mound of soil had already turned into a flower pot. Lang was so scared that his face turned pale. The fortune teller immediately explained. Looking at it like that, it's a goblin, not a ghost. And looking at its hand, it's oozing green, it must be a goblin flower. If it wanted to have the magic to turn into a pot of lilies like that, it would have to have cultivated for at least several hundred years, maybe even nearly 1,000 years. Listening to the old man's description, Lang suddenly thought of an extremely old woman looking at him happily. The more he thought about it, the more he felt nauseous. Lang was about to ask the fortune teller, but he saw the old man signal him to be quiet. Shoo! The goblin is coming. Don't pull the trigger. After speaking, he looked intently into the bronze mirror. He saw a red-eyed, yellow-lipped goblin holding a flower pot and placing it right in the middle of the door. He looked inside for a while as if searching for something, but when he didn't see anything, he looked disappointed and left. After a while, the fortune teller's spirit calmed down, he sighed, wiped his sweat and said, "Hurry up and I've stretched the red thread, otherwise if it sees it, both you and I will die. It's a very vicious goblin. When it catches a person, it will suck their blood and flesh until only a dry corpse remains." Lang asked, "What is the red thread?" He replied, "Red thread is a type of thread used when reburying graves with heavy negative energy, used to suppress heavy corpses such as zombies. Red thread is often dyed with a layer of chicken or dog blood to increase its effectiveness. For ghosts, red thread has the effect of repelling or binding, but for goblins, red thread woven into a bagua shape covering the front of the person can cover their eyes." Lang nodded and said, "So that's it." Then asked again, "So now how can I get rid of this goblin? At least don't let that flower pot appear again? Just thinking about it as a finger of some old lady who's lived for hundreds of years makes me feel disgusted." The old fortune teller smiled and replied, "It's easy to escape. Now I just need to throw the flower pot on the street again to make the goblin appear again, make it break its fingers again. Then I attach a body-fixing talisman to its body. From there I can rely on the direction of the bagua mirror to find where its real body grows, soak it in gasoline, burn the tree and it's done." Hearing the fortune teller nod and say it seemed easy, Lang did not think so. He said, "The goblin has magic, how could it let you harm it so easily? But going out there at this hour makes me feel a bit scared. Let's wait until tomorrow morning. I'll throw that flower pot away tomorrow morning." The teacher shook his head in disagreement and immediately dismissed it. "No, it has to be tonight. You don't know, the life force in your body is about to be sucked dry. Don't you see that you've been sick a lot lately?" Lang suddenly remembered, just realized that he had been feeling a bit unwell recently, but thought it was just a common cold so he wasn't worried. Unexpectedly, hearing the old man mention it like that, he felt scared, and quickly said, "That's right, for the past 2 days my stomach has been aching all over, and I can't go to the bathroom. I often have a fever and sweat profusely, but only intermittently." The old fortune teller clapped his hands and said firmly, "You'll be bedridden in 2 days. What? Are you thinking about throwing away that flower pot?" Lang bit his lip and said, "Okay, I'll throw it away, what am I afraid of? With you here, it probably won't hurt me." After saying that, Lang rushed out, grabbed the flower pot and threw it out onto the street, breaking it with a loud bang. The flower pot was then reduced to a pile of dirt with a faint mist-like smoke rising up. The old fortune teller quickly waved his hand and stuck a talisman on the ground, right next to the flower pot, then pulled Lang back into the house. After waiting for a while, the wind outside blew gently again. Through the bronze mirror, Lang could see the spirit of the goblin appearing outside again. It looked a little angry, but quickly calmed down. It calmly broke a finger, hugged another mound of earth, made it into a flower pot, and brought it to Lang's front door and placed it down. At this moment, it accidentally stepped on the talisman that the fortune teller had spread out earlier. The fortune teller happily slapped his thigh, and the goblin quickly turned around to look at him. But its eyes were covered by red thread, so it couldn't see anything. The fortune teller knew he had just done something stupid, so he kept quiet, not even daring to breathe loudly. He even had to hold his farts. The goblin waited for a while and saw nothing else, so he turned and walked away. Only then did the old fortune teller have a chance to relax and say, "I almost died." The wanderer immediately asked, "So what should we do next?" The fortune teller replied, "Wait until morning, then you and I will follow the bronze mirror, follow it and we will find where it is." Lang nodded in agreement, and the next morning, Lang went to a nearby gas station and bought a large 20-liter can of gasoline, then carried it home. The can used to hold the gasoline was originally a can of wine, and this time Lang took it with him because he no longer needed it. The old fortune teller saw Lang bringing gasoline back and immediately nodded and said, "Okay, that's fine." Then he urged Lang to bring out his motorbike to take the two of them along. He took out a bronze mirror shaped like a bagua, with a rotating needle sticking out, pointed it in all directions, then at one point pointed it straight at the intersection and shouted, "That way." The old man urged Lang to drive away immediately. Lang immediately agreed and drove straight in that direction. Following the bronze mirror's sign, Lang rode his motorbike to an area about 30 kilometers from Liangshan, extremely remote, deep in the forest. At this point, the motorbike could no longer go any further, and he could only walk. Lang got off the motorbike, locked the steering wheel, and together with the fortune teller, headed straight up the mountain. Following the direction of the bronze mirror, they got lost in a path that seemed to have been made a long time ago. Grass grew on both sides, and the ground in the middle was smooth and compacted like bluestone. There were signs of people passing by a lot. Surely, people who went to the forest in this area also liked to walk on this path. The path led high up, overlooking the vast landscape. Lang's motorbike was so small that it was now just a black dot. A little higher and nothing could be seen below. Climbing the mountain all day was tiring. Lang breathed heavily and cried out, "Enough, stop and rest for a bit." The old fortune teller immediately urged, "There's no rest, hurry up, it's dark and if the goblins find out, we're all dead." Lang waved his hand and breathed heavily, saying, "Even if I die, let me breathe first. Tell me, old man, why doesn't this goblin hide anywhere? Why does it like to hide in deep forests like this? If it doesn't intend to torture itself, doesn't it feel tired every time it comes back?" The old fortune teller waved his hand in frustration and said lamentingly, "What karma do I have to be with such a dumbass? Look, the goblin has the ability to travel through the clouds, not walk like us. If you're done breathing, stand up and continue walking, General. We don't even know if that tree is near or far." Lang took another deep breath, then gritted his teeth and stood up to continue walking, saying as he walked, "I'm asking you seriously, why are you still so strong even though you're old? Even I, a young man, couldn't stand climbing up here. What did you eat to be so strong?" The old fortune teller walked away laughing. He was also breathing but not heavily. He said, "The first is about breathing, the second is about rhythm. These two things since I was a child when I studied with my teacher, I have never been allowed to forget. Especially, you have to stand up straight, not bow your head, walk 10 kilometers a day to practice in the morning, do it regularly for 10 years. If you can do that, you will be as healthy as me." Lang widened his eyes in disbelief. He didn't think that this old man with a frail body would have such a miserable time in the past. It seemed that his era was still too good. The two men then stopped talking. After walking for a while, the fortune teller suddenly shouted, "Here it is, that tree is here, no mistake." Lang cried out, "Great, I'm tired of carrying this gasoline. Hurry up and go inside so I can burn that tree." The fortune teller nodded and led Lang deep into a ravine. They said they could see it close, but they still had to go 100 meters deeper to see the tree. The flower tree was as big as a banyan tree, hundreds of years old. Its trunk had become an ancient tree. Flowers and leaves grew everywhere, all sprouting branches of pure white lilies. Standing a kilometer away, Lang could already smell the lilies. Seeing Lang standing rooted to the spot, the old fortune teller quickly urged, "Hurry up, what are you standing there for? Pour gasoline on him and set him on fire." Lang woke up with a start. It turned out that he had just been in a daze from the scent of the flower. In a flash, Lang poured all 20 liters of gasoline on the tree and set it on fire. The fire was burning fiercely. At this time, the fortune teller quickly chased Lang away. "Okay, your work is done now. You can go home. I still have some trouble with this flower spirit, so I have to stay here to arrange things. It will probably be difficult for you to find me in the future." Lang was stunned, not understanding why this fortune teller had eaten some kind of poison today that he was chasing him away like an evil spirit. However, he did not investigate, nor did he want to investigate. He just turned around and walked straight. The way down the mountain was much less tiring than up the mountain. Lang walked for a while and ran down to where the motorbike he had parked earlier was. Suddenly, a groaning sound came from inside the mountain, as if someone was screaming. The sound was so faint that Lang couldn't hear it clearly. He shook his head, then got in the car and went home. That afternoon Lang butchered a new pig, and sure enough, after everything was settled, his meat sold much better, and no one came to him to cause trouble anymore. That night Lang went to bed early, ate dinner, took a shower and then jumped into bed comfortably, closed his eyes and went to sleep. His breathing evened as he fell into a deep sleep, glad that it was all over. But no, it seemed he was wrong. Right at this moment, in the middle of the night, there was a loud knocking sound outside the door. Lang woke up with a start, grumbled, stood up and looked through the crack of the door to see who was disturbing his sleep in the middle of the night. It turned out to be the fortune teller. He quickly opened the door and asked the old man, "Oh my God, what are you doing knocking on my door in the middle of the night? I thought it was a ghost. Why did you say you were home? And you even told me that?" The old fortune teller shivered and said, "I missed the bus and had to walk to get here." Lang burst out laughing and said, "Good for the blind fortune teller, still trying to act noble and act like a wise man with me. Serves him right, now get in here." Lang opened the door and raised his hand to welcome the fortune teller. The fortune teller entered the house trembling, then crawled straight into bed, covered himself with the blanket and closed his eyes. Lang was about to ask if the fortune teller had eaten yet, but seeing that he was already asleep, he gave up. Lang also crawled back into bed and slept soundly again. After a while, Lang was startled awake by a rustling sound. The fortune teller was no longer beside him but had gone somewhere. When he turned his head to look, Lang suddenly saw the old man busy under the kitchen cabinet, right next to the basin of frozen pig's blood from the refrigerator that he had just taken out that afternoon. Lang jumped up and shined the flashlight straight in that direction, and was immediately startled. Because the fortune teller had at some point dug his face into the basin of rotten, red blood, his mouth gulping down the red blood like a dog drinking water. His eyes were sparkling, in which there was a color that was red as fire, his lips were bloody but still bright yellow. Lang cried out, "What are you doing?" The old fortune teller was startled, turned around to look at Lang, his body trembling slightly. He said, "I'm so hungry, I can't hold it." Voice changer. "Oh my God, if you're hungry, tell me. That's rotten blood, and you can still drink it. Not to mention the worms in the blood." After saying that, Lang urged the old man to wash his face, then cooked him a bowl of noodles and urged him to eat. After the bowl of noodles, the old man went back to bed. Lang also went to sleep. When Lang was already fast asleep, the fortune teller unexpectedly woke up, a sinister smile on his face. He opened his mouth wide and turned towards Lang, only to see a green gas flying out of Lang's mouth and entering his mouth. The fortune teller's face suddenly changed into that of a girl, with a face full of blue veins, bright yellow lips, and fiery red eyes. It turned out that she was a demon, the demon in the deep forest that Lang had previously exterminated, not some fortune teller at all. Who would have thought that the fortune teller had actually died since Lang left? The faint scream that was heard at that time was the scream of him falling down the cliff. The goblin transformed into the old man's form and returned here to trick Lang. It used all its power to enter the house to absorb Lang's life force. Before, a flower pot was just one of its fingers, but now its entire body had entered the house. So Lang's life force was quickly sucked away. Lang's face turned as green as a banana leaf and he stopped breathing. The goblin laughed shrilly and said in a harsh voice, "Trin Kung, in your previous life you couldn't even burn me. In this life, your lowly descendant also plans to do the same?" Then patted Lang's face and said, "You and I have 3 lifetimes of fate, but our karma is endless. I didn't expect that Trin Kung's next life would be like Chu Sin's second life, just a Lang who sells pork. I will continue to wait for your next life. The hatred between us will never end." After saying that, the elf laughed loudly and turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared. Suddenly, the ghost of the bald hung appeared again. He came before Lang's body and whispered very clearly, "Goblin, goblin, it killed me. Run, my body is crushed." The ghost of bald hung disappeared. A stream of blood suddenly oozed out of Lang's mouth, flowing down to the ground, gradually forming a very strange bright red line, endless hatred, Trin Kung.